RedPanda is a streaming data platform that powers systems right here at the New York Stock Exchange, and they say they're innovating across multiple industries. Joining me now to share more is their founder and CEO, Alex Gallego. Alex, welcome to the New York Stock Exchange.
Thanks for having me.
So I understand that you just had some major announcements come out, but before we dive into that news, what is RedPanda?
RedPanda is a company that is a data company that is helping enterprises like the New York Stock Exchange mediate access of all of their AI agents to private data. And so the thesis is that private data is the next frontier for these AI and agentic systems. And so you sort of need a layer to mediate the access to enterprises' private data.
As I mentioned, you just made two major announcements, the first of which is the acquisition of Oxla. Can you share more about that and tell us what Oxla does?
We are super excited to add the Oxla product and engineering team to RedPanda. Oxla is a distributed compute and storage engine. And so in the age of AI, you can imagine the systems manage petabytes of data. And so it's very expensive to run them in the classical way. And so they've separated compute and storage to make it super efficient to run these very large scale workloads. And so as these agentic systems are trying to address, aggregate, or filter petabytes of data, they need to do it quickly, they need to do it efficiently. And so you need a query engine like the one Oxla provides to be able to tame the chaos and to be able to filter and aggregate in a way that allows agents to consume data fast.
All right, and you also announced an agentic data plane. Can you break that down for us?
So the evolution of the company, where we first started, we started working really with tier 0 mission critical systems. So examples could be protecting whitehouse.gov from cyber attacks from North Korea, powering all of the electric car companies in the United States, powering probably your checking account. Your check probably cleared because RedPanda helped clear your checking account. So that was the base. Last year, we made a big acquisition around connectivity. And so how do we bring data into the existing platforms? And so we bought a company at the time, it was called Ventos, and we rebranded it as RedPanda Connect. And then with this third acquisition with Oxla, what it does is it allows us to show up to enterprises and say, it's like, look, you have thousands of agents that are trying to access private data inside your enterprise. How are you going to manage the chaos? And so where CIOs are struggling today is really two big problems: access controls in governance and observability. So are these autonomous things accessing the right data? Do they have the right permissions? That's one. And then two, when something goes wrong, how do I debug that the model didn't have a gender bias for denying a credit card application? So those are the two main problems that we tend to help people with. And so you really need this three-legged stool, if you will. You need the streaming part to be able to go back and debug when something happened. You need connectivity to bring context to the agents. And then you need a query engine to be able to aggregate and filter data at really large scale.
And what are some more use cases for the agentic data plane?
Some of our production use cases is really this idea of from a prompt to a support. So let's take the example of Amazon.com was down recently, right? And so when an engineer gets paged, it's like, hey, the website is crashing. Like, what they do is inordinately complicated. They have to merge a bunch of signals from live systems and then try to coalesce that in real time. And so what we're helping enterprises do is reduce the complexity of being able to coalesce those signals to a single prompt. And the prompt says, like, help me debug why this particular system is down. Help me debug why DNS is down. Who was the last person that made a change? And so you're really taking this high-level human intent, and then you're sort of automating that. And then the other example is really with credit card fraud. And so I was talking with a company that's powering some of the largest credit card applications earlier in New York. And fraud is sort of a really complicated thing because now you have these bad actors actually using AI to push the envelope of what fraud can be. And so you need, in many ways, you need AI systems to be able to combat these other agents. And so you need a thing that is able to coalesce thousands of signals in real time with the right context.
What differentiates RedPanda from other players in the space?
All of the established players today have sort of a philosophy that says, send me all your data, and within this walled garden, maybe we operate really well. right? And so that requires like very expensive sort of deployments, one, and that doesn't work really for the enterprise. Enterprises really, and the global 2K, which is where RedPanda tends to work with, they don't like sharing their data with enterprises. And so a big fundamental change for RedPanda is that we meet developers where they are. That means that we can run inside their own cloud. We can run inside their data center. Yes, we also have a fully managed cloud, but the customer gets to run. And so one example is really with the US government. And so we're in partnership with Poolside. We are launching an entire new strategy to power like, what is known as air gap environments. Like, okay, what happens if you turn off the internet? Can you still provide usefulness, with the systems? Can these agents do the things that they need to do in an air gap environment? And so the main difference for RedPanda is that we meet developers where they are. We use an open protocols. We're not about locking people in. Instead, we're about giving them options and helping them tame the chaos with these agentic systems.
What is feedback that you got from customers?
I think right now it's pretty early. And so for most CIOs, they're just trying to understand what is AI, what is an agent, what is this agentic systems, how do I automate parts of the stack? And so in many ways, my job is to sort of wrap that complexity and give them these pillars or these tools in which that can manage that complexity. And so it's like, how do I go from a prompt to an agent? How do I manage security? How do I manage authentications? Frankly, boring and non-differentiated things. For example, for the New York Stock Exchange, we're here about, making trades and making new data products, but you kind of want authentication, authorization pillars, but sort of in the background. You don't want that preventing work from getting done. And so the early feedback is like, finally, there is somebody that's listening to some of the problems that we've been trying to solve. And so we're still early, and today is sort of the main launch, and we're going to be on the trading floor later, sharing with about 100 CIOs at the New York Stock Exchange later tonight. And so, yeah, excited to be here.
And if CIOs are just getting acquainted with this new technology and this new lexicon around agentic and all of these new systems, I would imagine their employees also have questions. How would you successfully roll out this technology in an enterprise organization?
Most enterprises that are engaging with us are really like forward leaning. I don't know if there's an alternative really for the world. In other words, it's sort of like an internet era. There were businesses that, failed to adopt the internet, and I'm not sure that they were successful. And then there's, basically everyone else that adopted the internet at some point. I think AI is a similar way. And so for us, it's bringing them along the journey. It's like, we can help you with a bunch of frankly, mundane, boring task like finding data, coalescing a bunch of signals. I think this is what computers are really good at. And so we have to, in many ways, show them the way, show them what's capable, and tell them, I was like, hey, we could do this safely. I think part of the reluctance from CIOs is that they didn't want to do this at the expense of customer trust or at the expense of leaking data. They want to adopt these agentic systems without making sure that their data is safe, that the data is not leaking, that their customer trust is not compromised. And so that's really how we're working with some of our earlier design partners right now. It's just like, here's the path, and here's how we do it safely.
And I understand these agentic agents, speaking of safety, are increasingly interacting with sensitive data. What protocols, if any, do you have in place to ensure the safety of these interactions?
So there are 3 parts on the safety of interactions. First of all, there's like the standard protocol. We wrapped the portfolio, the second acquisition that we talked about, in MCP. And so it's a protocol that allows agents to quickly talk to a bunch of internal systems without, a bunch of setup. It just sort of kind of comes out of the box. So that's step 1. The second thing that isn't talked about is this observability. It's not enough to simply connect your systems with an AI-ready protocol like MCP. You really have to give CIOs and the engineer who's getting paid at 3 a.m. tools to be like, when something goes wrong, this is how you go back and debug. This is how you understand that the model had a gender bias for your credit card application denial. This is, all the steps that I took to be able to go from A to B. It's not just that the code is being generated with the system, it's that the architecture is fundamentally different to the applications that I grew up building as an engineer.
What is next for RedPanda as we continue to see AI soar?
I think for me, it's about really focusing on the Fortune Global 2000. That's historically where we've delivered the most value. And so, as I mentioned, we grew up powering what is known as like tier 0 mission critical system. If RedPanda goes down, it's unlikely that some people can clear their checks. If RedPanda goes down, it is very likely that nation-state properties go down. And so they're just fundamental. Like you probably couldn't take the subway into a New York Stock Exchange if RedPanda crashed. They're just parts. We've become part of like infrastructure, really tier zero. And so we want to continue to show up to these enterprises and continue to leverage the trust and the relationship that we've had. Is like we know how to show up and build this tier zero system. And so now the next step for us is like, let me bring this agentic infrastructure with the same level of like engineering rigor that we showed up first for these tier zero systems so that you can trust it to run real production workloads.
Those were some really interesting examples you brought up about not even being able to take the subway into work if RedPanda went down. Do you think our world is now reliant on AI? Do you think we've crossed that invisible line?
I think definitely most interactions by the end of this year will be mediated by AI in some capacity. And so I think it's useful to separate like hype from like reality. Some of these examples that I mentioned are just the classic core business of RedPanda. Moving data really fast in a way that's reliable. With NICE, by way of example, we power the best quote of the day. And so if you're trying to consume it from the Asia Pacific markets, that's all powered by RedPanda, all of the data that's kind of going through the stock exchange. So we feel really proud of that relationship here. And then on top of that, you need systems to make sense of all of this underlying data. And it's really challenging to do that manually. And so what AI systems allow people to do is to just outsource the business logic to a prompt. And so you're saying like, hey, I want to make sense when you have, two stocks doing a crosshair, or how's the market trending, or are there negative news? You kind of want to coalesce a bunch of those signals. I think that is more recent than is being invented today. And I don't think is in production today. And so while I do think that parts of it are being mediated by AI, so for example, if RedPanda crashes, we have an entire agentic system that helps our support engineers make sure that the New York Stock Exchange comes up as fast as possible, right? And so in that way, yes, a lot of the features are mediated by AI, but the truly like agentic autonomous enterprise, I don't think is here yet. I think, we're going to be here within the next 12 months, hopefully, and hopefully RedPanda, takes part in helping large companies, evolve into the future. And so I kind of wanted to differentiate where we are versus where the world is heading.
All right, Alex Gallego, CEO and founder of RedPanda, thank you so much for joining us at the New York Stock Exchange.
Thanks for having me.